A cardiac replacement procedure has a mortality rate of 2.4%. 24 is the gateway to heroic salvation, and the Pakleds are smart. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2, Episode 17, Samaritan Snare, written by Robert L. McCullough, directed by Les Landau. This was May 13th, 1989. Where were you? And we have a very special guest today. We are so fortunate to have the writer of the episode, writer-producer Robert L. McCullough. How are you, Robert?
I'm good. How are you? I'm good.
Amazing.
I have a thing on my screen that says this meeting's being recorded, which is great. And I'm pressing got it, the button, and man, it won't go away. But
that's a terrible start. But hit got it, and hopefully that will work.
Yeah. I'm hitting it repeatedly, but it's not going away. Isn't that funny?
Maybe you can move it.
Bizarre. Let's see here.
So while we're figuring that out, everybody.
Okay, got it. Now I got it.
Yeah. All right.
We did it, everybody.
Okay, cool.
So we do want to give a very special thanks at the top of this episode to our good friends Mars DeVore and Robert Kaiser. Robert Kaiser is all the way out in Austria, but he never misses an episode, even though it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. But thank you very much to Mars DeVore and Robert Kaiser for sponsoring this episode. We hope you love it. Let's get into this, right, Cirroc? First things first.
Let's do it.
Mr. McCullough, you wrote 2 episodes on The Next Generation, or you are credited with writing 2. One was the Icarus Factor. You are credited as the guy that created the Anbo Jitsu battle. And this one, the Samaritan Snare, that we'll get into a little bit more a little later. First and foremost, how did you get involved with Star Trek The Next Generation? Do you remember what that process was? And do you remember exactly what your role was? You produced basically the entire second half of the second season.
Yeah, that back in those days, writers were basically, everybody was a freelancer unless you got on a show, and an agent would send you out and you'd get certain assignments. And I did a lot of work at Universal, including Battlestar Galactica. I did a pilot called Orion, the Man from Galaxy 5. And I also worked on the Highlanders and things like that. You know, sci-fi stuff, which I never really considered to be sci-fi. To me, they're all just stories. Doesn't matter where they take place. And so I guess the fact that I was a very fast writer and I was available, I got a meeting with Gene Roddenberry, which was very interesting. He took me in his green and black Rolls Royce up to the St. James Club on Sunset Boulevard, and we had lunch, and he had about 6 martinis. And I was actually afraid to drive home with the guy, but he was a very nice guy, and he and I got along very well. He had a profound belief in everything he was doing. You know, he was an ex-cop, so it was kind of I was picking his brain a lot about his life as a cop because I also wrote a lot of cop shows. So I think he liked the fact that I was kind of playing up to his true biography. Long story short, I met Maurice Hurley, who was, I think, co-executive producer at the time. And Maurice was a very engaging guy, reminded me of the old comic Stan Freberg, had kind of the curly hair and a very wild personality. He and I didn't really jibe very well in terms of our writing approach, but we had great time in the room together. So he was kind of a likable guy. And part of getting the job, Ryan, to answer your question is, everybody can write, let's face it. I've got a keyboard, you've got a keyboard, but the question is, do they want to be in the room with you? Because you're going to be in the room for a long time with everybody. And if you're an insufferable bore or an arrogant putz, you're probably not going to get the job. What they want is, it's very much a fraternity, at least it was in those days. Today, I think it's worse today because of these writers' rooms with a half a dozen people sitting around trying to get along and everybody trying to get credit for something. Makes it a very competitive environment. It wasn't nearly as competitive in those days. It was much more collaborative. So I met everybody. Next thing I know, I got the job offer, and I had been doing a number of shows, kind of working my way up the chain of command in terms of authority and responsibility. And that's how I got the producer title. In fact, they had a very strong line producer. Rich Berman was around at the time. He was kind of a co-producer. He was also tied in with Paramount very closely. So he was kind of the purse strings of the show. Mm-hmm. And he was also very much aligned with Roddenberry, because Roddenberry really would just read outlines and go to the screenings. That was about the extent of his work when I was there. He was much more hands-on in prior years, of course, but by then we were kind of moving into toward the end of his career. So he was kind of letting everybody else do their thing. There were a lot of politics involved. I won't get into that, but that's how I got the job. Series of interviews that all went well. And the fact that I could write quickly, because they were always very, very, very far behind on scripts. One of the reasons being that Gene would take forever to respond to an idea. You would tell him something on a Monday and you might hear back 2 weeks later whether or not that idea was a go for an outline, that sort of a thing. So,
Robert, what may I ask if was the, first of all, let me just say that you're a good-looking guy with a great voice, so you could be a star actor yourself.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
let me just put that out there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, but you know what, actors like you're an actor. You know what that life's like. No, thank you.
It's
difficult. People listening in right now and not seeing the video, just listening, you're missing out. Anyway, please continue, Cirroc.
But I wanted to ask you, when you were being schmoozed by Gene Roddenberry, what was the pitch that he was giving you about the show, or the kind of direction you wanted to go in?
His whole vision, the world of Star Trek, all of that. But I never told him that I had been at Paramount years before. My very first job was at Paramount as a gopher on a show you might have heard the name of, Mission Impossible. Whoa. It was the original Mission Impossible with Bruce Geller, and Peter Graves was the star, and guys like that, Martin Landau.
Yeah.
And we shared office space with Roddenberry's writing team in the same building on Paramount. And I would see the actors, William Shatner, come in to talk, or I don't know, get a drink out of the soda fountain or something. And they're wearing these Star Trek uniforms. They look like somebody's old pajamas to me. So I never really bought into the whole Star Trek thing. I thought it was kind of a goof. The fact that it ever went beyond the first 3 weeks was amazing to me. I had not read the scripts, of course, and it wasn't into the philosophy of it. But just from an appearance and production standpoint, it looks so rudimentary. It reminded me of when I was a child. I was 5 years old. I was on a show called Captain Zoom. And he was a guy who sold Bosco chocolate milk. And he would say, everybody drink your chocolate milk and we're going to go zoom into outer space. That kind of, it just reminded me of that. So I didn't really have a lot of respect for the franchise, frankly. But when I had that lunch with Gene, he really opened up his heart about how he wanted life to be better for everybody. And that Star Trek was really his vision of the utopian world that we should all be striving for. Okay, I bought into that. Wasn't sure how it translated into stories. And I read a bunch of scripts. The first day they hire you, here 25 scripts, go read these. And here's the show Bible, which was 200 pages thick. And it had architectural renderings of the starship. I mean, more detailed than you can imagine. I don't know, Cirroc, if they gave you that kind of stuff as a cast member, but my gosh.
A little bit, not that much stuff.
There was there was a whole culture into the whole thing. So you bought into that if you were going to be on the show as a producer, obviously. And my job was really to find good writers who could write quickly, efficiently, and didn't require me to do all the rewriting. So what was your question? I'm sorry.
No, that you answered my question, which was about, Gene Roddenberry kind of pitching the idea to you and selling you on the whole culture and the the mythology behind Star Trek.
Yeah. It was a philosophical lunch in some respects, because he gave me his whole philosophy, which I thought was terrific, that he really believed in what he was doing. No doubt.
Yeah.
No, Robert, I've got to ask you about the Pakleds here, because I don't know if you are aware of this, but there's a new Star Trek series called Lower Decks. And it is animated. And the showrunners, Mike McMahon, who also is doing Solar Opposites and who did Rick and Morty. But the Pakleds are back on that show, and they are basically the big bad of that series. I don't know if you know anything about this. Here's what they look like now on that series. So they have been revived. They are the bad guys. Now, the question is, where did you come up with the Pakleds, and did you have an idea of what they would look like in your mind, or did you just write, dumb people? And when you saw how they came out, was it close to what you had envisioned?
It was very close and better than what I envisioned, because I didn't envision the detailed makeup that the crew provided. I mean, the makeup I thought was pretty terrific. And to hear there's a new series featuring Pakleds, I want to know, where's my check? The whole concept of them came about. I think I wrote that after. I think it was the second episode I wrote, but I had rewritten and been involved in half a dozen or more episodes up to that point, and some of them were very, let's just say, they needed work, in my opinion, in terms of story and character, because if you don't believe what's going on with the real characters, with the people, it doesn't matter what the plot is, frankly. And so I was a little bit inured by then of the fascination with technology that the show promulgated to a great degree. There was so much stuff about technology that I just thought was not very interesting. And I thought, Captain Picard, the whole crew, they're all these freaking geniuses, they're flying around in galaxy, whatever, and they've got the answer for everything. Well, I didn't buy it, I thought everybody's got some flaws. Everybody's got some misgivings. Not everybody passed algebra. What if you had a bunch of people traveling through outer space who didn't pass algebra, right? So I wrote them as very obese, because everybody on the Starship Enterprise was perfectly fit. I mean, look at Riker. These guys are all trim. Nobody has a jelly roll. Everybody looked completely buffed. Which is appealing, certainly, but the world doesn't look like that. So I created these guys as being morbidly obese, I think is the description in the script, and dumber than dirt. How they even launched anything would have been a surprise to anybody. And then I'd also been aware of the fact that in LA at that time, there were a number of carjackings, people claiming to have car trouble. You'd pull over to help them, and they would rob you and steal your car, that kind of a thing. Well, what if that happened in outer space? So really, the Pakleds are a bunch of carjackers, frankly.
Perfect.
And so I just took a real life problem, threw it into outer space, and made these guys appear to be slothful, dumb, if you were inarticulate as can be, but beneath it all, extraordinarily clever. And that's how that came about.
Wow.
And the word Pakled, they're the kind who they're being led by the pack. We're all pack followers. We're pack animals, kind of thing.
Wondering how you came up with that.
It's just, well, listen, the idea came to me on a Monday. I had the script by Wednesday. It just wrote itself, it was very quick to write. And I also had my irreverence came through. The characters' names are actually the names of high school friends of mine backwards. That was kind of my inside joke. So I told my friends, after the show went on the air, I said, "Hey, did you see yourself on TV?" Like Reganog was the guy's name, was Doniger, spelled backwards. His father happened to have been a prominent director back in the 50s and 60s. And then Grebneglov was really the name Goldenberg backwards.
Oh.
So
Goldenberg.
It wasn't that imaginative. It wasn't that creative. I'll put it that way. It was just me being kind of a smart ass, frankly.
It works.
And kind of my inside joke. Nobody ever asked about it. Nobody knew any of it. This may be the first time I've ever revealed that.
Definitely wondered.
So that kind of came about that way. And then I wanted Picard. There's a scene there, as I recall, with Wesley, where Wesley is studying for an exam or something, and Picard says, have you read Henry James or something like that? And I had my background at college had been English literature and things like that, so I knew all this stuff. So my concern was that everybody on the Starship Enterprise was very technically oriented, but nobody seemed to have a liberal arts appreciation of anything, right? So I wanted to reveal a little bit of that for Picard, and I knew that the actor, if you will, had that background himself and would appreciate that. So I wrote that for him to just to reveal, kind of peel the onion a little bit about what really motivated him in kind of an intellectual way, not a technical way, because as I said in that scene, anybody can fly this thing. You just have to take the training, right? But do you understand why you're flying it? Do you understand why we're exploring the universe, why we're trying to expand ourselves? And that knowledge is really power, not technology. And the ability to acquire new knowledge is more meaningful than what we have in our hands today. So that was kind of my personal philosophical bent with that particular scene. And obviously, when you're writing these shows, you have to keep everybody alive. Everybody's got to have a scene that means something. And frankly, Picard didn't have a lot of stuff to do in that episode. So I had to give him something, and I wanted it to be something that kind of played to his strength as a person. When I say the actor, his person is very intellectual. If you had a meeting with him in person, this is a very articulate, well-read guy, and he never got to explore that in the character, at least until I had gotten involved in the show. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to also ask you about the medical kind of terminology that was being used, because I was thinking to myself, this is a real mumbo jumbo medical, episode. Pathogenic implants, myocardial enzyme balances, and those kinds of things. And when you're writing that stuff, are you just kind of plugging in words, or do you have the kind of like background?
I used to be a neurosurgeon. No.
On top of all of that,
we totally leave in though for a second there.
No, you make it up. That's fun because I had also worked on a couple of medical shows, and we always had tech advisors, and they always had this glossary of terminology. Do it this way; it's the only way. That kind of a thing. And I kind of wanted to spoof that a little bit. Again, I came at the whole thing from a very irreverent point of view, which was the mumbo jumbo is just mumbo jumbo, particularly medical terminology that when we're dealing with the 29th century, it's going to be completely different than it is today. So I just kind of reached for it, just kind of went for it. I almost used car parts as medical terminology,
You need a new radiator.
Exactly. That was my inclination, Yeah, for sure.
You did also drop a few word nuggets there. I'm glad you gave us the names of the Pakleds, because I was wondering where you got Reganad and all of these names from. It was just mind-blowing, and thank you for that. But you also threw in some other ones like Far Space, Starbase, Earhart. So I'm assuming that's a nod to Amelia Earhart.
Yeah, exactly.
You did a Bonstell recreation facility, and I'm still trying to figure out if that's a plug to something, maybe your high school.
Yeah, that's actually, I think that's actually a park in North Hollywood. Right.
Okay.
Oh, wait, is it the one on like Burbank and Tahunga?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
exactly.
Right. It's right there. Yeah. There's now somebody put a console there to make it look like it's a holodeck. They put like a Star Trek console at that park.
Wow.
So that it looks like it's a holodeck console, and that the park is part of the holodeck.
Well, that's where the name came from. That's funny. That's
Wow,
funny.
so that's the Bonsell Recreation Facility. We're peeling back the onions.
Right, right, right.
That is so amazing. Where did you start this at the show? Where was the starting point for you? Was it about the development of Wesley and Picard's kind of connection there? Was it about Picard's surgery, or was it about the Pakleds? Where was the starting point for the episode?
It was the headlines in the paper: carjackings in L.A. You know, how could you be so stupid to stop on the freeway to help some guy with a flat tire? Well, that's what people did in those days. And 9 times out of 10 in that particular period of time, the guy with the flat tire would pull out a gun and steal your car, So that's what really impacted me. Because we're good Samaritans, we also open ourselves up to potential danger,
Or in this case, the Pakleds took Geordi's gun himself, his own gun.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Aimed it at him. Here's something that I've been really wondering about. The character Sonia Gomez. She is in exactly 2 Star Trek episodes, or at least Star Trek The Next Generation episodes. The episode before this one and this one, and then that's it for the rest of Next Generation. But then she does come back as a captain in Lower Decks, the animated Star Trek thing we were talking about. So the story was that they were trying to make her more of a recurring character. They introduced her in the previous episode. They brought her back here, and then we never saw her again for whatever reason. Do you remember if there was a conversation of, make sure to insert this new character, Sonia Gomez, into the script? Like, was it important that you incorporate her?
I do not remember. But I know I was very much in favor of Hispanic characters because, half the world is Hispanic. I mean, Spanish is the second most widely spoken language on the planet. And I'm married to a Mexican, so who's also an actress at the time. And so I was interested in that kind of, progressive casting and writing, frankly. I didn't know that she didn't survive the series, but I'm kind of surprised. As Cirroc certainly knows, cast comes and goes kind of at a whim. It's very unpredictable unless an actor has a run of the series contract. Their survivability depends a lot on the writers, obviously, but also on I go back to getting along with people in the room, whether or not people like having them on the set, whether they get along with the series leads, and whether they're good, So, I mean, some actors can carry dialogue and some can't. So the fact that particular character didn't last, who knows why? A number of factors. It's such a subjective business. I mean, I've seen really good actors, Academy Award winning actors, not make it in television just because they can't show up that early, because the hours are killers and they don't want to deal with it, or they bring an attitude based upon their past career to the current role. And that can be very detrimental and disruptive to the rest of the cast and the producers. So again, it's all very subjective.
A bunch of regions. Yeah. But you actually, are one of the few people that wrote episodes for Diana Muldaur, who's, only on this second season, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Another cast member that we see kind of have their run at the end of this particular season. And I thought you did a good job writing for her as well, because I did like the kind of trick you pulled on us at the end, where she is the specialist that is being brought in to help with the Picard, surgery.
Right.
Kind of bringing her back around. She's like, I could do the surgery here. He opts against that, and it turns out they need her anyways, and they end up bringing her.
Sure.
So I thought that was clever as well, as far as writing, because I was not expecting that.
There were a lot of really good actors on the show when I was there. I mean, Jonathan Frakes was just the nicest guy. I'm sure you heard that 1,000 times, but just a decent guy, happy to have the job at the time and worked hard. He really cared. And he didn't, as a co-lead, he acted like a supporting actor, like he was just happy to be there, and oh my god, there's free lunch, he was that kind of a guy, whereas some of the other cast members maybe not so much,
maybe less. Well, you'll be happy to know that Jonathan Frakes continues to work in Star Trek to this day. He had appearances as Riker in different series, including newer ones, and he is directing. He has a hand in directing all of the new Star Trek series. He is constantly working still, and everybody loves him.
That's cool. Well, he also, after Next Generation, he went out and had a directing career for quite some time, and he's done a lot of different things. Talented, hardworking guy, for sure. He deserves all the success he's getting, for sure.
Great to hear.
Yeah. That whole cast is really good. And actually, sometimes there's moments there where I see Will Wheaton and I'm like, wow, I see what's so great about him. And there's moments of just where he gives you great facial expressions. He seems really honest and genuine in his emotional kind of sincerity.
Yeah, and he was very young. I mean, he was just a kid when he was doing that. And I don't think he's not very active in the business any longer. I know he did a series. I think he did a whole bunch of podcasts or something talking about his career, which wasn't all fun and games at his age,
And I also want to compliment you, Robert, because a lot of the Picard backstory has had him, and I've mentioned this before, but it has had a lot of a kind of an elite upbringing type of perspective. And what you did in this particular episode is give an example of the story of his kind of hot-headedness, immaturity, a young Picard, getting into the fights with Nausicaans at a bar. And I thought that softens him up and makes him more relatable as opposed to
everybody
infallible.
Exactly. If your protagonist does not have flaws, you just have a cardboard cutout, because everybody has flaws. I mean, let's just look at, I don't know, in Braveheart, Mel Gibson's character. His flaw was he didn't know when to back off, and he wasn't smart. He was brave, right? Huge flaw, wound up killing him. So every protagonist needs to have a little bit of something off, if you look at, Top Gun, Maverick, a seriously flawed character. He had to overcome his flaws to succeed. And I think that's key. That's something, and I just want to mention this while I have some audience. That's something that we really deal with a lot at the Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards, which was founded by my wife, and I do a lot of consulting on that. It's an online script competition, and we basically help writers bring their material up to the truly professional level. And one of the problems we see writers dealing with is the perfect hero, and perfect heroes, frankly, are boring. Nobody's perfect, and if your heroes are perfect, it's not a very good script. So that's something we try to do at the Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards, is help people understand that writing is it's a textured process. Worst thing I can imagine as an actor, Cirroc, would be if you're just this ideal character and you have to portray this monolith of purity. It's just terribly boring.
I talk about Breaking Bad. I use that as an example. The main character, somebody that you're kind of rooting for, but doing bad things at the same time, has issues of morality that he's struggling to kind of go through gray areas of right and wrong.
And you have sympathy for him right away. You have sympathy. Right. Forget the fact that he has terminal cancer, but the fact that he makes such poor decisions, that he's so impulsive. Exactly. I mean, you got to feel for a guy who get a freaking clue, man. So that's kind of an important part of writing, I think, is understanding human frailty. Now,
there was also a sadness to Picard's tone that you gave us in this episode too. Sorry to cut you off, Ryan, but the sadness was almost about him not being able to get married and find love, and kind of the commitment that he makes to his career as opposed to trying to have any distractions. You mentioned that. You also highlight that in this episode, another long-standing kind of character-defining principle behind Picard.
Well, that's true of all of us. Back when the women's movement first started, it was, oh, you can have it all. You can have a family and a career and a loving relationship. Well, that's false. Nobody gets to have it all. And those who try fail at almost everything they're trying, And you look at that, particularly in the world of celebrity in Hollywood, there's a reason movie stars are movie stars. Now, the reason is they have given up everything else to become a movie star and sustain that status. You don't see happy fathers with 3 children, and he's a Boy Scout leader, and he's a mega movie star, right? I mean, how many marriages has Tom Cruise had? How many marriages has Leo had? None, because he can't sustain a relationship because he's a movie star. So, right. And I think it's true of almost anybody in life. If you want to be a neurosurgeon, you're going to have to give something up. You're going to have to give up poker night with the boys because you can't stay up past 9 o'clock at night because you have to be on your game at 6:30 a.m. every single day.
No deal.
Exactly. So Picard to become the captain of the Enterprise, there's no way he could have had a family and all these other, a puppy at home and things like that, because he's too busy doing what he does, which is really one of the characteristics of a hero, somebody who's willing there's some self-sacrifice to achieve great things.
Yeah, it's the Superman, it's the Batman. They're not in a family household with kids running around. Right. They have to kind of give up that in order to be Superman or Batman and those kinds of
Here's an example, somebody that we all respect and revere. Man gave up a real personal life and ultimately his own life. Martin Luther King achieved things beyond human expectation. And look what he gave up, everything to do that, right? So it's true of all, again, heroic characters. They're not easy to write because you have to do this to them and still get us to believe in their mission, And so I think that's what helped Picard succeed for so long as a character,
Absolutely. Well, Robert, I know you've got to go. We've got less than a minute with you, but on your way out, I do want to make sure that we point out what you were talking about, the Santa Barbara. It is Santa Barbara Screenplay Awards.com.
Right.
Santa Barbara Screenplay Awards.com. Everybody go check that out. It looks amazing. It said something like paradise for screenwriters or something like that, which everybody could use a little paradise. I do also want to point out very quickly. So you created the Pakleds. They live on. Sure. That legacy lives on. The other thing was the Nausicaan story with Picard. That lives on. They revisited that in a later episode called Tapestry, which is one of my favorite episodes ever. I even have the Captain Picard from that episode. But that story, that little story snippet you created lives on in a very famous episode, is the crux of the entire episode. But Robert, thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time today. We really appreciate it. We could listen to you talk way longer, but I know you got to go. So thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, guys, a lot of fun, a pleasure. May the force be with you. Wait. No,
there it is.
Okay.
All right.
Everybody, take care.
Well, hang on one second. Everybody stick around. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Here are those trivioids of the week that you've been begging for, and they are as follows. The Enterprise is en route to the Epsilon 9 sector. Ensign Crusher is diverted to Starbase 515 for Starfleet exams. Data found the Academy examinations quite elementary. Commander Riker is being all nosy. The Enterprise receives a mayday from the rhomboid Dronagar sector 006. Captain Picard needs another cardiac replacement. The cardiac replacement procedure has a mortality rate of 2.4%. Captain Picard was at the top of his class. Captain Picard remembers his time at the Bonestel Recreation Facility and possibly made some passing reference to a Nausicaa's questionable parentage. Too many percentages in there. The Pakleds are smart, and 24 is the gateway to heroic salvation. All right. So I did some quick checking on Licia Naff to find out why she was not in any more episodes? And I couldn't find the answer. All we know is that either she left or she was let go. It sounds like she was let go, and that she regrets it, or that, you know, she was quoted as saying she was, quote, super bummed to be let go. That's all we know. Don't know why. So everybody, please let us know in the comments section below. Let us know, what's the reason. Did you hear something? You don't really need to guess. Just if you have any, links or websites or quotes directly from her as to why that character was introduced, was put in 2 episodes in a row, and then disappeared, let us know, please. But anyway,
the only thing I could think of is that maybe the 80s called and they wanted their hair back.
That's right. The 80s were almost over. They're like, we can't
proceed with this hair.
So, Cirroc, I've been waiting for you to see this episode. I've been waiting with bated breath for you to see this episode, because we've been introduced to the Pakleds already on Lower Decks. This is where they first came in, and I wish I could have seen your reaction when they're like, here are the Pakleds, and he's like, dumb as hell. What did you think?
They were funny. I thought they were funny, and they were interesting to watch. Actually, having already had seen the Pakleds in the animated version, this was a special treat to actually see where they came from and where they started from. After watching it, I thought, well, that means Riker is not even smarter than the Pakleds, because he got outsmarted by them. And Worf in the beginning was like literally saying, seriously, guys, do we need to send our best guy over there? Why don't we just, send the instructions over? Like, Worf was already, his antennas were up, and I thought,
right,
listen to Worf. He sounds like he's making sense right now to me.
They finally did Worf right. Usually he's the guy that says, Captain, recommend we shoot phasers. No, shut up, Mr. Wolf. Right? They're always like, he's always getting cut down. But this time he did the reverse. This time he said, let's exercise caution. I don't trust them. We hardly know anything about. Yeah. And Riker was the Worf of the month. He's like, no, just throw them out. Who cares?
Those guys are idiots. What are you talking about?
Hey, they can't even chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. And he was making like little slights and jokes about them, And Worf was completely right to exercise caution there. So I loved the way Robert wrote him in this episode.
I do too. I also like the way he wrote the Pakleds. We look for things. We are smart.
At one point they said, we need the things we need.
Yeah, definitely hilarious. I like the graphics of the Pakled ship too. I don't know if that was redone. I'm sure we're going to be able to ask Matt Boardman later if that was part of the redo, because I thought it was really cool. The interior of the ship was a little bit lackluster for me. It kind of didn't give me couldn't really see any vibes there that I thought were like really great set design for an interior of an opposing ship. It was not that detailed as far as what I saw standing out in the background. It looked kind of vague, let's say. So I wasn't really impressed with the ship design of the interior of the Pakled ship, but the exterior I thought was cool.
Yeah, gorgeous exterior. Looks kind of junky, but it's like super detailed. They've got big old screws on things and deflector. Yeah. That's why they're saying they've got like this eclectic mix of tech, because they don't create their own technology. They steal it. So they kind of just patch it on bit by bit. And that's why in Lower Decks, their ship is so big, but it's got pieces of other ships on it. So they just keep building and building. Pretty soon they're just going to have this gigantic ship full of just crap.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what a clever idea. Robert gave us that insight about, Pakleds the idea stemming from the, I guess, the rise of carjacking in California, which became a big thing in that time period, right? That was kind of a new thing to get carjacked. People were falling victim to that. So I thought that was a cool, like, way to integrate a current headline story and put it into context of Star Trek. Something we've seen the writers do before. I think it was Melinda Snodgrass, if I'm not mistaken, or no, it wasn't her. It was what was her name? She was the attorney that wrote the episode that was basically based on the constitutional kind
That
of
was
law.
Melinda. No, you're right. That's
Was that
Melinda.
Melinda? Okay. So yeah, just taking your own, life experiences and in this case, headlines that were going on in the current events and transforming it into a sci-fi script. That's part of the, clever creation that I really love about what the writers are able to do. The only thing I would say is I missed a few things. I kind of missed O'Brien in this episode. I wanted to see O'Brien.
Yeah.
As the transporter chief, right? Because this required some kind of transporter chief being present in order to get Geordi back, in order to send him out there. I thought it would have been a great opportunity for O'Brien.
Totally agree. In fact, there was a moment when like my thought was, okay, if there's no O'Brien in this episode, we should have Sonia Gomez be the transporter chief then. So that way we see a little bit more usefulness in there. And if we're not going to have, O'Brien as the transporter chief, I want somebody else that's interesting, somebody, an actual character, not just, the extra of the week. And all they showed, if I'm not mistaken, is the back of the transporter person. And it actually looked like it may have been Sonia Gomez. Like it had somebody with that hair and with the gold uniform. So I don't know if maybe that was actually Sonia Gomez or just somebody that looked like her. I don't remember if we saw her face. I just remember seeing.
No, there was no face. There was no lighting actually to distinguish that person. They actually purposely kept them in the shadow.
Yeah, and I thought it would have been really cool if it was Sonia Gomez, just giving us something, because then otherwise maybe they just didn't have O'Brien because there wasn't a line for him. And so they're just like, we can't bring him on to be an extra, but we could do that to the new girl. Or we can do that to, extra number 7 or something like that. But yeah, I thought the same thing when O'Brien wasn't there, because we've been treated to so many cool O'Brien moments, and now we're starting to expect it. We're getting spoiled here.
I'm getting spoiled, and I'm thinking like any kind of transporter kind of operation goes under his authority. So that was one thing I kind of was missing, and I was a little sad to not see O'Brien. But one of the big things for this was, Picard's ego, and a lot of the thing is that he didn't want other people to know any kind of chink in his armor, I guess. He didn't want the other crewmates to know that. That's why he was kind of keeping this thing secret and trying to be quiet about it and doing the surgery procedure off the ship and whatnot. But, I think there could have been more of a lesson to address that, to address his ego and his, the bravado, or him wanting to maintain in a certain level of mysticism amongst the crew or something to that level. I think they could have addressed that further instead of it making it about other things and him mentoring Will. I thought there could have been an opportunity for Will to do a little bit of mentoring for the captain. We're not judging you based off of your heart condition. We honor and respect you because of your courage or your leadership or these other things, not because we think that you're infallible or because you're just this Terminator of a man. I think they could have had a discussion there that could have opened Picard's mind up a little bit to realize that his crew is family more so than keeping it away from your family, sharing it with your family.
But for me, I can understand. Like, I think it's a two-pronged thing. One is, we know Picard is stiff and has an ego and all, he's snooty and all that stuff. But then the other side of that is, I can also understand where, captains are not supposed to fraternize with the rest of the crew. So if he takes that a step further, he's thinking, I don't want to seem vulnerable. I don't want any, personal relationships or any friendships. I want to stay separate and above, so I can understand that. It's certainly, I think, is the way to go, unless, like in this case, you're kind of complicating things unnecessarily. Rather than having it done right here and now, you're making them go off course, or, he's going off course to do this thing. Then maybe he's not there to make the correct judgment call against the Pakleds. What if Geordi died? Then he would have forever thought, shoot, if I had the procedure done on the ship, I would have been there when that happened, most likely, unless I would have happened to have been under when we met up with them. So I think it's the right way to go, but it's certainly a judgment call whether it was the right way to go this time. This time, it feels like maybe there's the exception where he should have just been like, all right, I'll just do it, but just don't tell anybody, damn it. Keep it between us,
Right. It could have been one of those situations, or even having the secret slowly spreading, right? So, like, let's say Pulaski agrees to do the surgery, but in private, and he says, but don't tell anybody, and you're just me and you at 1,200 hours or some shit, and then maybe there's a distress call and somebody walks in on the surgery and says, doctor, the Pakleds are, and they see that it's a surgery, and then that spreads out, and there's a kind of a telephone game of everybody finding out what happened. That could have been another way, but needless to say, they took advantage of kind of some of the things. They put the guy who hates kids in a room with the guy with the kid, right?
And he eventually warms up.
Yeah.
They get together over some sandwiches. And for a second, I thought Picard said, do you want a sandwich? I was like, did Picard say sandwich? Are you four?
No, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. But I thought it was funny that he offered him coffee. And I'm like, there's no kids out there that like coffee that I know. Would you like a coffee? Like, coffee? No, I'm a kid. I don't like coffee. So that was funny to me.
And then Dr. Pulaski was like, more like a turn your head in coffee. Hey, am I right? No. No. And I also thought it was weird when at the end when Wesley says, Captain, I want to say I had a good time. And Picard looks at him and he's like, so did I. But he doesn't. There was no smile in it. There was nothing like a twinkle in his eye or a little wink wink. It was like he was reluctantly hating to say it too. It was like, he did seem to underplay a couple things. This is one of those rare occasions where I feel like Patrick Stewart could have played up a couple things. Like there are a line or two in the shuttlecraft when Picard says something like, will you just pilot the ship or something like that? But he said it in such a nice way that it didn't really kind of fit the line. And then afterwards he like apologizes or I don't remember exactly what happened, but he says, I'm sorry for snapping at you. Or there's some kind of pullback. And I'm like, but the way you said it doesn't really warrant that next line. You got to see that next line tells you that you said this line too harshly. You should have said, will you pilot the ship? Sorry, or that kind of thing. But saying, will you pilot the ship? Sorry, or I'm exaggerating, but it was a little bit underplayed, just like the line that you mentioned was the other one that was a little bit underplayed, where he could have just said, as did I, with even just the smallest smile or the smallest twinkle in his eye. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to tell Patrick Stewart how to play Captain Picard, but I feel like there were a couple lines that I wanted a little bit more from them.
Yeah, I felt like there was just a little under delivery on it. I mean, just a little bit too cold or something that I felt. Even when he says, you need to open your mind to the past, and he's got the book in front of him. Like, first of all, if we and a buddy go out and we have a road trip or something, and I see you break out the book on me,
there better be a hidden bag of chips in that book.
Yeah, there better be something in that book that we're both going to enjoy. because this whole bringing a book out, it's like you do that on the plane when you don't want to talk to the person sitting next to you on the plane. Like, I'm on the book. You see me, leave me alone. It is like a very it's the best way to not invite a conversation with somebody is to have a book, right?
Totally. Now it's also cell phones. Back in the day, it was like a newspaper. Newspaper is like shields up, dude. It's not like a book or a phone is like, no, thank like you, this. I'm busy. But a newspaper is like, you don't even know what I look like. I have the Great Wall of China surrounding me, and that was the best. Newspapers must have been just, you take that with you. You bring that sports section with you, and you are all set for the day. You can just hide in that.
You could be asleep back there, and nobody knows.
Yeah.
I want to say also that I thought it was really cool when they had first off, the set design that I did like was the operating room that they had Picard in. I thought that was a nice little set design. It looked a little old school, almost like from the original series in some ways, with the way the laser things were kind of being guided. I thought this doesn't look that much more high tech than the original series.
Sure. And did you notice that they were all wearing those red outfits, just like Deep Space Nine does later? I love that consistency. That
I did like as well. But there was also, we mentioned ethnicities of Sonia Gomez, representing the Latinas out there, and only in this 2-episode cameo, but certainly somebody whose presence was felt and noticed. Then I also felt the presence of the Asian doctor that they brought in to assist in the surgery. It was a very brief cameo, but it is a level of diversity that I like to acknowledge when I see it.
Yeah, the actor's name is Tsi Ma, playing the biomolecular physiologist.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see him. It makes the diversity authentic to me. And then also, like I said to Robert, I was really pleasantly surprised that Dr. Pulaski was the specialist that doctor was thinking about recommending for the situation. So it all came in full circle, and I enjoyed those beats.
There were a couple moments that actually made me laugh out loud. One was when Geordi was like, now we're armed to the teeth. And the Pakled goes, teeth are for chewing. That slayed me. That was a brilliant line, beautifully delivered. The other one that slayed me was when Picard returns at the very end. He returns to the bridge and everybody's clapping for his return. And he goes, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Like, that is such a Picard thing to do. He's so snooty. Oh my God, that was too good. There's a lot of ha-has on that line for me. I beg your pardon. Beautifully written.
That one I liked. I wrote that as well. And then that's when they're like, Captain's back.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Make It So cameo in this episode when Wesley says to him, hey, how come you don't get married or something? And he says, something about wishing for a family or something, and he says, wishing for a thing does not make it so.
Oh, sneaking that in. You're right.
Yeah, he snuck the Make It So in there.
Mm-hmm.
One of his theme lines.
There was another thing I wanted to point out, and it's similar to how you said the Pakled ship exterior, beautiful. These are all the things redone and remastered that they really stand out. Like, you forget you're watching something remastered until you see some of these exterior shots or ships or something. And then you go, whoa, that looks way too good for 1989. Well, and then you go, oh, that's because they cleaned it up. So they do a beautiful job of cleaning it up. And where it really jumped out at me, surprisingly, again, this is like the second or third time this happened, was just the shot of the shuttlecraft that Wes and Picard were in. It's very plain. It's very simple, but it looks beautiful. Like I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, that is another time we saw it in the shuttle bay a couple episodes ago, and it just looked gorgeous. It was smooth, it was clean, the coloring on it was vibrant, kind of like a pale white, not fully white, and the red is beautiful. I don't know. I just thought that they've done a great job on the shuttlecraft, on something that's supposed to be basically the plainest thing. Looks beautiful.
I agree with that. I also like the way the lighting looks on the engines when they're just kind of propelling through space. It looks clean and actually very realistic. The only thing I will say though, and I do think the script was good, and the story was, there was enough story there. The problem is, I feel like the camera was just stuck. And that's one of the things that bothered me about watching this. It was just too cookie cutter, like close-ups. There was no movement of the camera. And when you don't have the camera moving, then the story doesn't move. The story and the camera both have to move. And I felt there was just a lot of just cutaway shots, close up here, close up there, captain here, captain there. And then it just becomes choppy when I'm watching it. It's always just chop, cut, look over here, look at this guy. When the camera's moving and it's like constantly flowing, and you see, one guy talks and then it moves pens over here and they say, well, go over here, and then you got this, and the camera's moving, the flow of the episode moves, and you can, ride the wave of the story a lot better. In this particular case, with the straight, close up here, 2-shot here, 1-shot here, wide shot here, and it was just constantly cutting like that, I was left feeling myself saying this story has to move along faster. And it wasn't, it made it feel longer than it had to. And not because of the lack of storyline per se, but because of the lack of the camera movement.
That's really interesting. I didn't catch that. You've got a good eye for that. And I'm thinking the world deserves one of these days for Cirroc frickin' Lofton to direct some Star Trek. I've got to see, because when you're talking about it, you're not talking about it from a viewer. You're talking about it from the guy behind the camera. You're going like this and you're doing and I'm picturing you. I'm like, this guy's got some directing in him. There's no way you don't. Just like your space dad, Avery Brooks. But hey, everybody, it's time to get serious. It's time for the home run of the day, the 7th rule home run of the day, home run of the episode, everybody. Cirroc Lofton, who gets the home run of the episode today?
I'm going to give it to Robert McCullough. I'm going to give it to him. He wrote a character that an alien race of people that we're going to end up seeing decades later, and who essentially live on in Star Trek infamy. And I think that's something good. I also think that he gave us some backstory on Picard that makes him more relatable. The whole, bar fight Nausicaan story is something that makes him feel more human to me, and something that I think Wesley was also entertained by. Like, oh, cool. The captain's got a cool story for once, instead of just trying to tell me what book I need to read. Have you read that book, Wesley?
Like, you see me reading, bro? Leave me alone. You're right here. If I'm reading your damn book, huh? Passive aggressive mother. I completely agree with you. Robert L. McCullough gets the home run of the episode for me as well, for his writing of the Pakleds. And for it, here's the thing for me. I should have said this earlier, but this is one of the first episodes I remember seeing, or at least when I look back at my days of watching The Next Generation a way long time ago, this is one of the most memorable episodes because it made me think. It wasn't the standard, procedure. It wasn't the standard formula. It was like, here's these dumb guys. Whoa, we just got tricked by these dumb guys because we underestimated them, And it was one of those few 5 or 6 or 7 episodes that really gave me like a little lesson or stayed in my brain. And I remembered that different angle. Every TV show in the world, they all have that same kind of formula, that same kind of thing. We recognize the pattern. We get it. This was one of the few that had a twist that I did not expect. It was a new story being told that I had never seen or heard before. So definitely Robert McCullough gets that home run of the day for me. Secondarily, the Pakleds in general, the actors that portrayed them, the makeup effects people that made them look great, but the actors acting dumb beautifully and funny and weird, and we could totally get it. Like they fit it. I'm sure they took what was written on the page and they elevated it. At least they certainly did for me. So big ups on those. Now, also big ups to the following people. Special thanks to Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan, our good pal Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Anna Post, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, Matt Boardman, the Matt Boardman, that is, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, our good buddy Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manisfee, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and the outrageous Jason Okun. I want to know if he's going to say the same directorial stuff as you did. I have a feeling he might. Everybody stick around for that free-for-all, and you will find out shortly on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton and the free-for-all bunch, led by Melissa Longo.
Hi there.
We've got Mr. Chris McGee, Anil O. Polat floating out in space.
Hey.
Got Jason Okun with a cool poster behind him. Looks like Geordie. The poster does. We've got Dr. Susan V. Gruner on the bridge of the Enterprise D. We've got Mai live in Tokyo with a heart and a peace symbol behind her. Jed Thompson's going to his very first convention soon. We've got Greg Kenzo showing off some Pakleds and Geordie behind him. And Carrie Schwent with a cool Seventh Rule shirt that you can get at our Teespring store. And you can click that link in the description box below. Just click on that Spring Store link and get yourself your very own Seventh Rule shirt or mug. All right, let's get into this. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I'm gonna give it I'm gonna just go 7 straight, 7.0. I was gonna say 6.9, but I'm giving it a little boost for Pakled boost.
All right. What about anybody else that doesn't know already? Do you have any guesses?
6.2.
7.4.
5
Oh,
for
really?
Greg. Jason, did you also say 6.2?
0.5?
I did. I said 6.2.
Yeah, both of you did. Eve made her guess. She mailed it in today. Her IMDb prediction is a 6. You guys are
that's
heartless.
cold.
I know. That's cold, Jay. That's Kevin Eubanks. Shout out to him. The correct answer is 6.5, which I'm kind of surprised by this. I really actually enjoyed this episode quite a bit. Maybe it's just because I thought the Pakleds were such a fun alien race and such a good character, but I'm wrong, apparently, according to the bunch. So, Melissa Longo, start us off, get us on the right track. What'd you think of this episode?
Well, for me, it was a mixed bag. Because it felt like the A story and the B story could have been episodes on their own. They kind of felt like they were forced together and they didn't really fit, in my opinion. There were good things about both stories, but I would have preferred it if they focused on one or the other and then made another episode about Picard getting his heart transplant and going there, or rescuing Geordi from the Pakleds. I feel like they could have dived deeper. I really enjoyed the scenes between Wesley and Picard. They felt very strong and very character driven, and Wesley Will Wheaton, as Ryan and Cirroc have both mentioned in the past, is really good. He's got this genuineness to his acting where when he asks a question in earnest, it really comes across that way. So I like watching that. I like the Pakleds, and I want to see more of them because they're interesting. They're a very quirky, bunch. They're a very quirky bunch. So, and I want to see more of them. And I'm glad that we did get to see more of them in Lower Decks. I like that their species was fleshed out a bit more in that show. So, yeah, it was a mixed bag. Not because either story was bad, but I just didn't feel like it fit together.
Interesting. Great points there, Melissa Longo. What about you? What say you, Dark Lord Chris McGee?
Say it's a fun episode. We finally get the return of Ensign Sonia Gomez and Ensign Sonia Gomez's hair. Wonderful 80s hair. So maybe she'll be a recurring character on the show. I kind of agree with Worf in this episode. Why send the chief engineer to the Pakled ship instead of just one of the, I guess, regular engineers? I get the feeling that after Geordi was taken hostage or abducted, whatever, that Worf had a really hard time fighting back the instinct to say, "I told you so." This, of course, the first mention of Nausicaans. If I recall correctly, they were so named after the lead character in a 1984 anime called Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Of course, Mike can correct me on my pronunciation here, which was in turn based on a 1982 manga. Because the writer was, or one of his family members was a fan of anime. And of course, at that time, anime and manga were very niche in the US. It was difficult to obtain. I was thankfully one of the few that had some knowledge of it. So relatively few people in America at that time had heard of it. That is until 2005, when Disney released an English dub for the film. And one of the actors they hired to voice a character was none other than Patrick Stewart. And of course, I love the fact that Picard's Nausicaan story becomes the basis for what I think is just one of the best episodes in the future of Next Generation. As far as a non-appearance mention, I think one may qualify. During Picard's story, he mentions his friends or mates that he was with on Starbase Earhart. Boy, that's a mouthful. So maybe Cortan and Marta count as NAMs for this episode. I'll let other people be the judge of that.
I think if Picard said, did he actually say his friends? He said with a couple friends?
Not by name. He just mentioned the friends and mates.
I think that counts. What do you guys think?
It's the same people.
We got to ask Homer.
Yeah, Homer.
He's going to ruin our fun again.
Well, there's also 3 of Nausicaans.
True.
Yeah.
They were in that episode. They had
kinda
names, kind of.
As far as my memorable quote of the episode, of course, I'm going to leave off all the obvious Pakled quotes, it is broken and so forth. There were 2 that stood out to me, so it's hard to pick one, but I'll go with a more interesting one, I guess, which is wishing for a thing does not make it so. Back to you, Ryan.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. Anil O. Polat is hanging out with us, and we are happy for that. What do you think of this episode?
Yeah, I like all the stuff they set up. I think it's funny that nobody listens to Worf, and like they do a reaction shot on Worf when the Pakleds kidnap Geordi. They just show him just looking all pissed off, and I'm like, man, like, you know, it takes all the way to Deep Space Nine for the poor guy to be respected. It kind of is funny and sad, but yeah, I also think the concept of kind of reminds me of Rom, like acting stupid when you're not, is especially if you're in space when nobody knows who you are, would be a really good way to like attack people or get away with stuff or whatever. So I like that. I like the concept, and I like that Lower Decks kind of took that further, just acting dumb, but you're not really that dumb, but still kind of dumb. So So yeah, it was a good episode, except I feel bad for Worf.
Thanks very much, Anil O. Polat. We all feel sorry for Worf. Have you ever seen that supercut of like every time that Worf was told no in The Next Generation? There's like 150 of them. It's just like, no. Quiet down. Get out of here, Worf. It's horrible.
And Riker is so sure of it too. So he's like so sure that he was, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just send him over there with no protection, nothing, just all by himself.
Riker's like, did somebody say no protection? Jason Okun is also here. What's up, Jason? What do you think of this episode?
Well, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be behind the bush. I honestly think it's pretty bad. And, there's again, even in episodes that may not be the best, there are always moments, and there are plenty of them here. And I think so. If you think of the Picard Wesley story as the B story, there's plenty there to mine. But I think obviously by the name of the episode and the main plot, things actually don't work out. They do look better on the page than they do on the stage. And frankly, the Pakleds belong in Lower Decks. They don't necessarily belong on the screen, and you have to do them right. Are we dealing with a race that kind of appears stupid but is really sinister and smart? And you see some of that, but it's not even throughout. Especially with, frankly, I think Christopher Collins did a more or less a decent job at doing this. Leslie Morris, who was the chief engineer, I think it varies from being sort of this kind of sinister to being, a little silly. And once they turn silly, they sort of lose their menace. And the background actors, I'm not sure they were directed properly. I mean, they had, their smiles were way too dumb to even make it seem like they were space-worthy, creatures at all. And I think it kind of varied throughout the episode. It doesn't quite know what they want to be. On the one hand, I mean, I think it works better when they're just sinister, and it appears that they're a little slow or their speech is not developed, as Data said. But in reality, if somebody is that sinister, why would they fall for such a stupid gig at the end? I mean, it's just, it fails its own logic, I think. So sort of it did not work for me at all. I mean, they're too cartoonish, or at least the way they were done, they were a little too cartoonish to be taken seriously. And frankly, when Worf and Troy are the smartest people on the ship, it's kind of a unique episode, and that's what it is, and everybody just ignores them. It probably is a kind of a unique thing in the annals of certainly Next Generation, because Worf is not often portrayed as the brightest of the bunch, and I think he often is a punchline of those jokes. I mean, it's nice to see that he obviously says the right thing, but the fact that everybody ignores him doesn't do anybody any favors. I mean, it looks decent. I think Les Landau does a reasonably good job. I think it's his third outing as director on Next Gen, so he's certainly developing things. And it's not cutting edge, but there's a lot of kind of views of low angles and what have you. There's a long wonder at the beginning where Picard kind of walks from the Stein station to turbo lift and back. So you do see something a little bit unusual, but for the most part, it's sort of run of the mill. It could have been better. I think it really had to be executed in a very, very careful way for the Pakleds to actually come off as less than sort of a joke. And I don't think it was done right. I don't think it was handled correctly.
What a downer. Hey, Cirroc totally agrees with you with the directing. He mentioned the directing, and we're like, well, we got a feeling that Jason Okun might mention that as well, with the camera angles and stuff. Thanks very much, Jason, for your evisceration of this excellent episode. Dr. Susan V. Gruner is also here. She loved it. What'd you think, Sue?
Well, some of my lines have been stolen already. The first thing I wrote was how much I love Dr. Pulaski. She and Diana Muldaur and Will Wheaton were just so fabulous. There's 2 episodes in this episode, and I agree with Jason that one could have been handled a little differently, but I still didn't hate it. And I also made a comment about why didn't they listen to Worf and Troy? I thought that was bizarre. And we need more information. I love that we start to see a little bit more with Picard and Will talking to each other honestly, and that Picard opened up. I thought that was really great. But it sort of left me hanging a little bit. I thought, okay, so what's going to happen next? Well, obviously I know what's going to happen next. But I think they had a chance to do more with that relationship. And I don't recall if they really ever do. I think we shall see. I had completely forgotten about this episode. And then in big, ginormous writing, because I usually don't pay attention to the deep stuff because I'm too busy just enjoying the show, I wrote, who came up with the red scrubs and the red pillow for the operating room and everything? That's just all so wrong. It was just creepy. And I wrote, oh my God, I kept thinking posh twat from Eve, the way Picard was acting.
Twat.
That earworm that I cannot get out of my mind from Eve. Thanks, Eve. But he does redeem himself a little bit at the end of the episode. But I thought, gosh, he acted like such a jerk so many times. And the names, just for the heck of it, the names of the guys, the Pakleds, their names are spelled backwards. Am I right?
Yes, you nailed it.
Goldenberg and Doniger.
Very good.
Who are those? Are those the actors? I have no idea.
Friends of the writer of the episode, Robert McCullough, who was earlier in this episode and told us that. So you nailed it.
We should find those guys or women or whoever they are and hack into their email account or something, because they're using something backwards. They keep doing it on all these episodes. Backwards names. I'm just kidding about the hacking. It's just a joke.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Sue. We're all watching you now.
Great.
We're all keeping an eye on you. Mai is live in Tokyo, who's only hacked emails twice, so she's one of the good ones. What'd you think of this episode?
I got to ask a question first, given my background, and that is, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Sorry, a little Elvis Costello for you guys this fine Friday the 13th morning here in Tokyo. This episode, wow. I think it had some really heavy messages. I think the writers were particularly clever on this one. I got to give the home run of the day to the writers. Absolutely. I thought the creation of the Pakleds was absolutely genius for the message they were trying to convey. It seems that the writers were indirectly making the observation that people who are not in possession of as much wealth or property as another are often viewed as lesser people, maybe even by themselves. That people who perceive the world at a slower rate than others are to be considered simpletons or stupid, maybe even by themselves. And that people who are not as articulate as others are on a lower rung of humanity. The message that seems to be coming through loud and clear is that none of this matters. And if we evaluate others in these and similar ways, we are in fact of lesser quality ourselves. That's what I felt on this one. It shouldn't matter if you prefer focusing on fixing a car or investment portfolios or a new dress or a piece of literature, etc. I think the message that the writers lay at our feet today is threefold, and it goes like this: people are people are people. And it's only when we recall this, that we ourselves become better, become a better iteration of ourselves than we were before that. So I'll end my rant with a restatement of an oft quoted and very negative statement about others that has been popular in the US since the wars in Asia in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and then later in places where it's much warmer and drier in the 90s. And my rephrasing is this: love them all and let God sort it out. Shalom Alachem, my friends. Shalom Alachem.
Thank you very much. My live in Tokyo, early morning there. Jed Thompson is here. What's up, Jed? What do you think of this one?
I love this one, and I didn't remember it until I started watching it, and of course with Lower Decks and the Return of Pakleds, that made me enjoy this even more. And there's not much that I can say right now. I'll save a bunch of stuff for things left unsaid, more like nitpicky or detail-oriented stuff. But I chose this as my background because I thought this was actually the best part of the entire episode, as a couple people have pointed out. The conversation in that shuttlecraft between Picard and Wesley, and I really think that ultimately was, in terms of far-reaching for the series, I think that was the best. The part and how Picard is just, he's got this, he starts off with just such a stereotypical machismo, doesn't want his medical records, talked about amongst the crew, and that sort of stuff. And of course that shouldn't be anyways. But he just starts this whole episode off on such a gruff, I'm going to say it again, machismo attitude, and Wesley just puts him in his place with I had to type it down. Everyone knows you don't like kids, and man, you just saw that pin pop that balloon. It took a couple of scenes there, but. I had to choose this as my background because it was the best.
I think we're losing you, or I'm losing you.
Yeah, I thought it was me.
I think he's back now, right, Jed?
I can hear you guys.
It's broken.
Okay.
Like the last 5 seconds of what you said we couldn't hear.
Yeah, it got a little rough. If you want to repeat that.
I was on a soapbox, Ryan, and it was grand. I solved world problems, and I'm so sorry. You'll have to stay tuned for things left unsaid.
Those kind of things can only be said once. You're right. Okay. Thanks very much, Jed. Gregory Kenzo is here out in Hawaii somewhere. What's up, man? What do you think of this episode?
What's up? I agree with Melissa and a lot of what Jason said too, but then I really like what Mai said, about, the letting people be who they are and kind of accepting them as they are. I have to say about this, I think it's another example of like what could go wrong with why the Prime Directive is in place. Like these, it seems like this is an unadvanced planet, and the Pakleds are an unadvanced species that got a hold of some technology that allowed them to just keep adding onto their technology. They're a little smarter than how they come off, but yeah, I do think it was like a disconnected episode. That's why I thought IMDb would be like lower because of that disconnect. But I do like a lot of things in this episode. I think it's like a Picard ego episode. Like it really breaks down his character and like why he is like that. But I like how he acknowledges how he was really cocky in the past. He still kind of is, but he acknowledges it and says he learned from it, which is great. Just something I think we all kind of were in our youth. But other than that, I thought it was really cool backgrounds, like Starbase 515 on a planet. I thought they were all in space. So yeah, that was cool. But yeah, this one, just the Pakleds kind of made me uncomfortable, just like the five of them crowding around Geordi and, yeah. But other than that, I think there were some really good things in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll save that for later.
Yeah, let's save the good stuff for later.
Yeah, I know, right?
Let's only focus on that stuff.
No.
Okay. Carrie Schwent is also here. What's up, Carrie? Thanks, Greg.
Well, hello. I enjoy this episode. I think the Pakleds are just adorable. They are very much the embodiment of a keychain I had in high school that says I only look sweet and innocent. And I love the funny way they talk, just like the Star Wars background behind me, just the funny way Jar Jar Binks talks. I love the way he talks too. Yeah, Pakleds are just super adorable, and looking into seeing if I recognized anything else the two main Pakleds had been in. The Pakled captain, and my brother will love this when I tell him, but he was in the original Transformers cartoon. He was the voice of Starscream, and I saw that and got very, very excited because I used to watch that cartoon with my brother. And he was also, I think that if I remember right, the Cobra Commander in like the original G.I. Joe cartoons too. So he has just a very cool voice, and loved that. Geordi, I think, suffers a little bit from, I think the reason he got kidnapped was so he could reap the results of his instant karma, because they clearly heard Geordi when he walked up on the bridge and asked if their rubber band was broken. So little bit of instant karma going on there, I think. I loved the way Picard told the story about how he got his injury, and the way he's describing it. I fully expected him to start busting out with a couple lines from Star Wars about the wretched hive of scum and villainy. So naturally, I had to use the Mos Eisley Cantina for my background. Couldn't resist. Pulaski very much has a cat who not only ate the canary, but ate the canary's entire family with the grin she's got on her face when Picard wakes up and sees her. She was very much enjoying his reacting and knowing he couldn't run away from her, and had to talk to her there for a minute. But for my limerick this time, I decided to have a little bit of fun with it, and came at it from the potential scenario of Geordi was on that ship for a little while, fixing stuff, and they were probably chatting. What if the subject of poetry happened to come up, and after he left, one of the Pakleds decided to try his hand at a limerick? I leave it up to you as to how well he did or did not do. You think we are weak, but we are strong. We search for things that make us stronger. We will no longer be weak. We will have power. Next time your crimson force field won't work because we will have power. I had to, yeah. Geordi absolutely sold no, they used their crimson force field. No. He absolutely sold that. The Oscar goes to Geordi at the end there for that. But yeah, I couldn't resist coming at it from a Pakled point of view this time around.
Well, that one for me was up there with the Binar limerick.
I was thinking the same as soon as the first line. I had the first line, and then the rest of it just came pouring out. And I said pretty much the same thing to Eric. I'm like, they're gonna love this one.
We brought up the Binar limerick on the last review we did of Lower Decks, so look out for that.
Nice.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Carrie Schwent. Faith Howell is here. She got French fries a minute ago, by the way. How were they? And what do you think of this episode?
So this episode is very, very memorable, as I'm sure you guys all understand. But but watching it now was a very different experience, and I don't think I would have liked it if I had seen it as an adult, for sure. A couple of things that I thought of while I was watching this time. I remembered the adage that I've also often heard as a parent of a nonverbal child, that nonverbal does not mean non-thinking. And so I kind of watched with that perspective, and that, you know, maybe we should have taken these guys a little more seriously from the beginning, and maybe we wouldn't have had this problem. But overall, I think the real gem of this episode are the Picard Wesley scenes, for sure. I really enjoy watching those two play off of each other, especially when Picard's guard is down, when he's not forced to be the captain for everybody, that he's just one-on-one as a mentor to Wesley. Especially, I loved how the line about, you know, do you want some more sandwiches? I was like, yes, I do, please. Like, I can almost taste those sandwiches. But I do have a question, and I don't know if you guys can answer it. Maybe we can carry it over into things left unsaid. I just do not get the tension between Picard and Pulaski. Like, is there relationship history there, or is there, like, it didn't seem when she came aboard that like they knew each other, aside from maybe as a professional name drop for Picard, but he really doesn't like her. And even though she's grading, I don't see that it's that, or at least hasn't been shown to us that he would dislike her that much. So it just doesn't make sense to me.
He called her that woman.
Yeah, he's very hateful towards her.
That particular surgery requires a rectal entry, and that's why he didn't want her doing that.
Oh no!
But
Oh my God.
I had to leave out of here real quick.
Wow.
Well, maybe we will talk about the rest of that and Cirroc's take on the next segment.
Because I really felt like there was something private going on there with the surgery. That's why he was, you know, anxious about it in the beginning. That's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll cover it a bit more on the other side, sounds like. I think everybody's got opinions, especially Jason. He's like, I got so much shit to tell you guys right now. so we'll do that. But until then...
But look what we get from this episode. We get one of the best episodes ever. And
the Pakleds.
Greeked out Picard.
We get the Pakleds. We get the Nausicaans. We get Picard.
An impression of Nausicaans.
Oh, I see. Melissa's trying to get me to do it, but I won't. I'll save that for the next segment for anybody that's seen it. Okay, it goes like this. Play dumb jut human. That's what he sounds like, right? It's pretty good, Cirroc. Trust me when you see that episode. All right, we got to run. Thank you very much to Melissa Longo, Chris McGee, Anil O, Polat, Jason the Outrageous Okun, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, my live in Tokyo, Jed Thompson. Enjoyed the New York City Comic-Con. That'll be fun for you. Greg Kenzo, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell. For myself, Cirroc Lofton, Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, and Melissa Longo. Thank you all very much for joining us. And until next time, enjoy our Wild America. I always want to say that because of that show that nobody watched, but it's always remember the seventh rule.